Okay, so we're going to give everybody a chance to pile in, grab some water if you can, and get ready for a great presentation over the next hour. Just a few minutes or so to allow everybody to get situated. While we're waiting on some more attendees to log in, I'm going to go over some housekeeping rules. For those of you who have attended our webcast before, welcome back. We're so excited to see you again. For those of you who have not, welcome in and welcome to the ERPfixers journey. I'm seeing some familiar names. Hello, hi, Ashish. Good to see you again. Amy, Adrian, hello, everyone. Okay, so before we get started, we will have a live Q&A at the end of this session if time allots. We will be posting the recording of this session as well as the answers to the Q&A on our website a week from today. Since everybody who is attending has registered, you will receive an email next week with the link to the recording as well as those answers to your questions. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to ERPfixers Ask a Fixer webcast, May 2023. Today, we are discussing new SAP Press book, Production Variance Analysis, and SAP S/4HANA, hosted by John Jordan and Janet Salmon. Next slide, please. What is ERPfixers? We consist of top quality experts in all SAP modules who are ready to help and assist with their knowledge in SAP. We offer an online platform, SAP Optimization Assessment, Material Ledger, S/4HANA Transitional Roadmaps, and Cost Transparency Reports. If you'd like more information, please visit our website at ERPfixers.com. Next slide, please. Today, we have Janet speaking with us. She is the Chief Product Manager for Management Accounting within the development organization of SAP SE. She is the author of 5 SAP Press books and 3 SAP Press ebooks, including the recently published Production Variance Analysis and SAP S/4HANA. This webcast launches the publication of this book. Janet is currently working with the SAP development teams that will take this topic further in future releases of SAP S/4HANA. Next slide, please.
Is that the red slide?
We just need...
Oh.
You just skipped yourself.
You need my bio. Okay.
And also introducing John. John has done several webcasts with us as well. He is the founder of ERP Corp, and ERP Corp provides expert SAP consulting and training. You have his email above if you need to reach out to him for some additional questions. He is also the author of 3 SAP Press books, including the recently published Production Variance Analysis and SAP S/4HANA. Again, this webcast launches the publication of this book. At the end of this webcast, we will share a discount coupon code for this book. This webcast also launches the SAP Controlling Conference, which is in September 17th through the 19th. It will be held in San Diego, California. We do have a special offer for all of the attendees. If you use the discount coupon code JJ100, you can save $100 off the Controlling ERP Corp conference. This code does expire on May 12th, so hurry in and get your tickets as soon as you can. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to hand this off to Janet and John. Before I do this, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please visit the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A box or the chat box. Please put your questions there. I will be collecting them throughout the presentation, so that way we can get them answered for you. Okay, guys, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And thanks so much to you and Paul Overgel and ERPfixers for hosting these webinars. We really do appreciate it. I know there's a lot of work and you make it look easy, but there's a lot to it, and I appreciate that. And thanks to my co-host, Janet Salmon. I appreciate it. Janet, I know you're very busy and you're taking time out. But you could be doing other things, but I do appreciate it to help explain this book and something about S/4HANA and the development of S/4HANA. Appreciate that. I would just like to have a practice with the chat. If you go to the bottom of your screen and click on the chat button and just put in the city that you're currently in and send the chat for all to see so everyone can see all the cities that we're all in. So please go ahead and do that now. And let's get the participation started. There we go, Germany already. I don't know where that is, but Janet probably does. Dudenhofen, is that right?
Dudenhofen, yeah, it's nearby southwest Germany.
Okay, good to see. And please, everybody, go down to the chat and just put in the city that you're in. It's kind of fun, just to get practice and participating. We've got some shy people here that I'm not seeing them.
John, we are getting some in the Q&A box. We've got Chicago.
Oh, the Q&A box. Oh, yeah, I see that.
There you go.
That'll work too. There you go. Chicago, Poland, Montreal. Nice. I like it. Thanks so much, guys. So I just wanted to get, so please feel free to put comments for all to see as we go through. It makes it more interesting for me and Janet and Jessica and the other participants too. Don't be shy about questions. We encourage it. I just wanted to mention about how this book came into being. It was in 2006. I got an email from SAP Press. They said, would you be interested in writing a book on SAP Controlling for us? You're writing all these financials experts articles and presenting at conferences on this topic, and we don't have any books on it at all. And I said, sure, what would the title be? And they said, well, you're the expert, you tell us. And I thought, well, I can't write a book on all of product costing as my first book because it would be too big. So I decided to make it a smaller topic, but still explain the whole process of product costing, which was variance analysis. And as it turned out, that was a good choice because it explains the whole product costing process, but in just 300 pages. I'm not attempting to explain, make to order or stock in transit or all the other variations. It's just the simple make to stock manufacturing explained on a journey from the very start of the process to the end. And it made it simpler for me, but it makes it simpler for you. And it's designed to read from start to finish in 300 pages. And yet it has enough detail to understand the process on the journey. So another title of the book could be, manufacturing costing explained. I used the word production because that's what I thought at the time. But within a page or two after reading the book, you'll understand where I'm coming from. So it's designed to explain product costing from start to finish. And I think it was the first book on controlling, and I think I got Janet's attention at that stage because I think she got interested in writing a book then. But so Janet, how did SAP approach you as well about writing a book, or did you approach them about that?
I think they approached me in the end because, as we were saying when we were preparing for this, I remember seeing your book when I was at SAP Insider and thinking, oh, maybe I could do that. And then thinking, I had two small children at the time, and most of my nights were spent helping them with their homework and helping to get them reading. The thought of actually writing something was like, well, I could manage to write. I was writing for SAP Financials Expert at the time as well. But they approached me in 2011 and asked me if I was interested. And by then my children were a little bit older, and I thought I could do it. And I tried to write my first controlling book then, and that's gone into its third edition on ERP, and then I've rewritten it from an SAP S/4HANA perspective a couple of years ago.
Oh wow, yeah, that's awesome. I wanted to mention that I wasn't approached randomly. I was working hard writing articles and blogs and presenting on SAP Controlling without any knowledge that what would happen with all this information. But because I was putting my name out there, I was approached to write the book. And I think it's a good practice for any consultant or end user to get ahead, get your name out there by writing. You should be writing every day and learning as you're writing, and getting your name up there. I just wanted to mention that that's just the way it works. And it's a lot of hard work, but it does pay dividends if you consistently do it.
Yeah, I mean, people often ask me why do I do it? And one of the things that I notice is if I've actually written something as a book, I've really thought it through and sorted things in my own head. So if I do find myself doing a presentation, even if I wrote the book 3 years ago, it's kind of organized and structured, whereas otherwise I'm kind of reading the bullet points and I'm only 80% there, and then I get caught out.
And the other thing we mentioned in our preparation talk is that, so I picked the title for the book, and that's the first step of the process. After you pick the title of the book, you have to determine the table of contents, which is the chapters. So once you've got the title and the chapters, then you start filling in some section headings. And then once you've got the sections, then you start filling in with the text. And that is the process for writing at least a technical book, and maybe other books as well. So there's definite process with it, but that's the journey you go through, as far as I know, was for me. For the latest, to update the latest to the latest version of the book, SAP Press approached me again. Do you want to revise the book for SAP S/4HANA? And I said, well, I need some help with that. And very fortunately, when I reached out to Janet, Janet was willing and able to contribute. What were your thoughts when I reached out to you, Janet? You thought not another book, or yeah, that sounds interesting, maybe you can make that work?
Well, as I said before, I only managed to write one book on my own, and then I realized I always needed help. I find it a very lonely process writing books. So the idea of co-writing appealed to me far more than, would you like to take my old book and turn it into your book, which I didn't really fancy doing. I like the idea of the collaboration. And I think it's always interesting when two writers come together, because you always bring different points of view to the table, and you always have points that you're stronger on and the other's stronger on. And sometimes you realize by talking that you can learn from each other. You've experienced different things. You've got different customer examples in your head. And I find that quite an enriching experience, where they're just, trying to sort of lock everybody out for 2 hours of an evening and start writing. I find a very lonely experience. I'm not sure I'd be very good at doing that for too long. It doesn't do me any good. I need that conversation. And I think the books benefit from that conversation.
I agree 100%. This was the first book I've ever co-authored, and it was really interesting. Your comments, well, maybe if you express this in another way, or maybe you read this blog on the latest developments in S/4HANA, I just wouldn't have known if I was writing by myself. So I got to learn and make the book a better book by those conversations. I like that process a lot. So we've included, very fortunately, we included everything at least to S/4HANA 2021, and we actually included some 2022 content too, through Janet's connections and information and access to systems. So chapter 7 includes the the universal parallel accounting and the event-based information, where SAP is heading. So that's a very interesting chapter 2. So it's got very recent information on it. So that's the journey of how this latest version of the book came into being. And I highly recommend, if you want to learn product costing, read the book start to finish, because each chapter takes you on the journey on a logical journey that happens in product costing. And really, product costing is, in manufacturing, is creating cost estimates on what you think the cost of manufacturing something should be, and then you manufacture it, and you compare the actual manufacturing cost with what you planned. And SAP, fortunately, creates variance categories as to where the differences exist and what caused them. So that's a logical journey. And this book does follow the process logically from start to finish for SAP product costing S/4HANA. The additional benefit of this book is now we explain S/4HANA as you go through the book. So you're not only learning product costing, but you're also learning S/4HANA. And I just wanted to take some of the mystery of S/4HANA away. The benefit of S/4HANA is the universal journal. That's where all the benefits come from. There are additional functionalities, but it all stems from the universal journal. So as long as you understand the universal journal, that's a good starting point for understanding S/4HANA. And this book definitely helps with that journey. So the first thing to understand with product costing is you start the journey the year before you do the manufacturing. When you estimate what the sales will be for the next year, and that comes from your sales teams generally, and you generally enter that into sales and operation planning, which is now becoming IBP, which is integrated business planning. Fortunately, SAP is allowing us to use S&OP for a while. We don't have to switch straight into IBP, but for a while we can, if we're using SAP, we can, which is basically a spreadsheet in SAP for the sales data. We can continue using that for a while before we then learn how to use IBP. And I do notice that SAP Press, it just launched a book called S&OP in IBP to help us with that journey. So you put the sales into S&OP, and then you convert that sales plan into an operations plan, which then allows us to, look at our manufacturing capacity and what parts we need to order to manufacture these to this plan. And then once we get those requirements for the parts and activity prices into SAP, that then allows us to start creating cost estimates. There is an SAP note here for what's happening with S&OP, but basically it's becoming integrated into integrated business planning. If you've got any questions on that, just put them in the chat now while Janet's here, and we can get the answer immediately. We, in the next chapter, examine our long-term planning, and that allows us to get the requirements and the quotations for the purchased parts to get into that cost estimate for the manufacturing for next year. Janet, do you have any comments on where we're heading, where SAP is heading with that functionality, just quickly?
I mean, I think we mentioned in the book with the cost center planning, we're moving that also out of the ERP world and into SAP Analytics Cloud for planning, and we put the notes in there, but we took the decision not to demonstrate it in the book, but to keep things the old-fashioned way.
Right.
But when you get to chapter 7 and I start to talk about universal parallel accounting, that's one of the switches that you end up making, that you switch to the new planning table and you switch to the new way of doing planning and the new way of deriving your activity rates. And we've got manufacturing customers, certainly in Germany, already doing that using SAP Analytics Cloud for planning now.
Excellent. Yeah, we did try to keep it simple so it's easy to understand in this book, while still putting reference information if you need to research this more. Here's some SAP notes and here's some books. We did try to keep it simple to understand, and I believe that we achieved that. So that's the first chapter, and that's the first start of the journey for product costing, is the initial planning the year before your manufacturing starts. So let's go to the second chapter, which is when we create the cost estimates for the next year. And generally, if we're doing all this correctly for the manufacturing plant, we would be creating the cost estimates a couple months before the start of the next year. And then we'd be creating a costing run for all the parts. And then we'd be examining the messages and fixing the problems with the bombs and the routings and the activity prices that are in. So there's a lot of work in that planning when we're still in the year before we're actually going to manufacture. And in the book, we discuss material masters, bombs, routing settings, and activity rates that are needed to create the cost estimates and the costing runs and the configuration behind the scenes and the costing variance. We go into some detail on those. So you've got all the information you need to set this up.
Yeah, and I
So
certainly
we-
found myself wishing when I read this chapter that I'd had all this information. Those of you who don't know my career at SAP, I began work as a translator and then became a writer. And I was supposed to write the documentation about cost estimates when ERP was new. And of course, the prerequisites for creating a cost estimate, create your material masters for every raw material, create a BOM, create a routing, create all your work centers, tie all these pieces together. And then, and only then, can you run through the things that you're trying to write about. It was quite daunting at the start, and I'm sure there's still people out there that are slightly daunted by this first process.
Well, I think that means a lot coming from you, Janet, because that's the purpose of the book. Thank you for that feedback. I like to hear that, and I've got lots of feedback and emails from people thanking them for the simplicity of explaining a complex process. Jessica, I was thinking maybe can we have a poll and just see who's actually have access to the previous version of this book? Just
Poll is
go ahead.
okay. Looks like we've got some people answering.
Nice. We'll just wait for a minute for those answers. It's a nice simple poll. The book's been around for at least 15 years. So I imagine that some people will have a previous version of the book and wondering should they purchase the latest version of the book. And just trying to explain that absolutely you'll get a quick training course on S/4HANA while you're at it, and an update into the new and developing functionality that is becoming more important. Let us know when you're getting a representative sample, you think, Jessica.
Okay, I'll give it just another second.
Give it a minute.
Okay, can you see the results, Sean?
Right. No, but maybe you can tell us.
Sure. So we have 60% answered yes and 40%.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's good to hear. Thanks, Jessica. So there we go. I can see it now. Yeah, about 60%. So my guess is that 60% are considering purchasing the new book, but wondering what will they get for it. And you will get a completely rewritten book based on the same principles, plus S/4HANA explained simply. Thanks for that poll, Jessica. Let's go to the next chapter. So we've done the initial planning the year before, the sales and operation planning, converting the sales plan into the operations plan, updating the BOMs and routings and the activity rates as part of, and the purchasing requirements for the purchase parts. Now let's go to the next chapter, which is actual cost. So we've planned the cost and the cost estimates, and there's a lot of work in that. And we've spent probably 6 months, or some companies do 12 months, they continue planning, some companies, but there's a lot of work. So then we do the manufacturing in the next year, and we compare the actual costs with the planned costs. But firstly, we introduced the Universal Journal and its impact on primary and secondary costs. And I required some tuition from Janet how to explain that correctly, so you benefit from those explanations. Thanks, Janet. We walk through the steps on the shop floor. We create a production order, and we do confirmations. We issue raw materials to the production orders and the process orders, and have a look at how those costs look on the production order and the advantages that we now have with the Universal Journal. Just move this box here. So we now have the work center and the operation in the Universal Journal. which is a big advantage for product costing and variance analysis. So we need to be aware of that, and you get visibility to those through the new S/4HANA apps.
Yeah, and I'm pretty certain if you've been in the product costing space for a while, at some point in your career, somebody will have said to you, hey, I did this confirmation at operation level. Why can I only see the cost center and the activity type in the actual course? You know, why can't I go deeper? And it was because we just used to summarize that information away. And that was one of the things that I insisted that we put back in and said, look, we have this information, we've got this universal journal, we can record that information now. And so people have that transparency, because people are often wanting to not just say, what were the costs in my production order, but what are the costs going through a particular line? And it was a piece of information that we just used to lose in the past.
Yes, that's a big advantage of S/4HANA. You do have to use the apps to get access to the information, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
You can still do variance analysis without it, but it's a big advantage, I believe. And Jessica, can we just have a quick poll on who does have access to or works with S/4HANA in our audience?
Okay, I'm launching it now.
Perfect. Thank you. There we go. Let's just wait a minute while people think about that. All right.
You want me to go ahead and in the poll?
Say it again.
Do you want me to? We pretty much have everybody answered.
Right.
Okay, what are you seeing, Jessica?
Okay, we're at 85% yes and 15%.
That's actually more than I expected. That's great. So at those people, I guess Janet and I would recommend that you investigate the new apps. And we mentioned these apps specifically in the book to have a look, to take advantage of the work center and the operation for variance analysis. We recommend that. It's valuable information. Okay, let's continue the journey. We've done initial planning the year before. We created the cost estimates to estimate how much it will cost us to manufacture, and then we've manufactured this year and compared the actual cost to the planned costs and then the variance analysis and understand what the differences were. Now, the next part of the journey in chapter 4 is period and processing. So we've done the manufacturing during the period, then at the end of the period, we do the period and processing, and that involves WIP calculation, overhead, and variance analysis, and other things that you can do at period end. But we're mentioning the main things here. And in the variance analysis helps us understand what happened in manufacturing that we weren't expecting. And we do settlement. Now in S/4HANA, we are starting to introduce the concept of real-time processing. And you've probably heard of the event-based processing that's being introduced right now. And there's some advantages to that. There might be some disadvantages in some industries that Janet and I were just discussing before this webinar, but need to be aware that event-based processing is coming, but you need to be also aware that you first need to fully understand period and processing. And so I recommend that you read this chapter closely and understand period and processing, and then have a glance at event-based processing. Because the fact is that most people at the moment just won't have access to event-based processing yet. It's in the very latest version of S/4HANA, together with universal parallel accounting. And if you have access to it, that's great.
But it's rarer than that, because although it's in on-premise 2022, it's only for greenfield customers. And at the moment we're on pilot release. So at the moment, everybody who wants to use it has a conversation with myself and a colleague, and then we release the business function. So, you know, there's a handful of people using it for sure. So if we were to do the poll now, it would, if we were lucky, there would be 1%, there would be one person participating in this call.
It's funny you mentioned that. Why don't we do that, Jessica? Why don't we have a poll right now? Who is using event-based processing right now? I've caught Jessica by surprise, but
I'll have to look at the names, but I can't always tell who we've given I know which organizations we've given access to, but I can't pin people to their names.
Okay, it looks like we've got some people putting in their answers.
Do you see names, Jessica? Maybe we shouldn't mention names, but there probably won't be too many.
It doesn't show me names, it just shows me percentages.
That's okay.
Would
those companies with access, would that be mostly in Europe? Do you think?
No, they're all over. Actually, I'm telling a lie, because a lot of our public cloud customers are using it, and they're in principle, anybody who's got multiple ledgers has got universal parallel accounting running with the event-based. So actually, we do have significantly more. It's just in the core on-premise private cloud world that at the moment we're only releasing to the business function to people we talk to.
So Janet, in the public cloud latest version, is event-based mandatory, or is it just default and you don't have to use it if you don't want to?
In the public cloud, it's our advised solution. So in the public cloud, things work with scope items. So our default now, if you were to start afresh in the public cloud, would be you would have event-based variance calculation would be your default.
Right.
But of course, we had customers who started before 2105, and we're trying to gradually get them to. Obviously, it takes a while for your existing production orders to wash out if you're not food manufacturer or something, that everything's in the fridge by the end of the day. So the old orders are still washing out.
Oh, I see.
And the new ones are starting. So
and what
so
about
you can have a crossover period. And an on-premise system, then the event-based, we're only supporting greenfield at the moment. So you'd be greenfield and you would only have event-based. We've locked off all your favorite transactions if you have the universal parallel accounting business function on.
There's some flexibility by the sounds, but definitely SAP is heading in that direction.
That's right. And the reason we're being so restrictive is actually to save ourselves, because we know there's still a lot of industry content needs to be enabled. There's still a lot of country content that needs to be enabled. And even some of the ETO and MTO scenarios aren't enabled yet. And we don't want people to be stumbling upon that. We want to have had a proper conversation up front.
And Jessica's given us the results of that poll. Thanks, I can see it. So surprisingly, 25% have access, they've read about event-based processing, which is good. You can read more about that in chapter 7 of the latest version of the book, and 75% are still coming up to speed, and that's okay. There's a longer journey for event-based processing, but I do highly recommend keep researching period and processing, and you're not losing anything at the moment by not reading about event-based processing. You eventually will have to, and the book is a good starting place in chapter 7 to start coming up to speed. Thanks for that poll, Jessica. You're getting quicker at this. Thank you. So that's my comment on period and processing. SAP is working on simplifying that process. We at the bottom there, we explain actual costing and how it rolls up purchase and production variances. And in actual costing, I'm talking about material ledger / actual costing, as opposed to actual costs, which we spoke about in the previous chapter. So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, I think that was one of my very first SAP Financials Experts articles, was trying to explain the actual costs you see in your cost center reports and everything, and it just means it often means actual quantities multiplied by standard costs, and that actual
Oh,
costing was taking all the purchase price variances and all your production variances and pushing them all the way through,
right,
so that you really had genuine actual costs. But you couldn't have genuine actual costs in a real-time system, because you often
right,
hadn't got all your invoices in, you didn't know your final production costs and so on. So the classic example in the production environment would always be something like
right,
energy costs, where you didn't know how much energy you were actually going to be
right,
charged for, and you'd be catching all these differences. You'd be making assumptions in your plan about how much your energy was going to
right.
cost, and how much your water, whatever other resources were going into the process were going to cost, and also how much your raw materials were costing. And
Are
our
you
very early
getting,
actual costing customers were often in the food or in the chemical industry, where they had very volatile raw material costs, and also
right,
very volatile and significantly expensive resource costs in terms of the production process. And that was
are
why
you,
they said, classic product costing, where you lock your standard in and then you manage everything against your variances against that standard, just wasn't relevant for them, because they had this
right.
volatility. And even now,
I think-
I wish to point out, because I get at least one mail a month says, I don't
Mhm.
want to do actual costing. You still, even in S/4HANA, don't have to do actual costing if you don't need it.
Exactly, exactly.
If you're not in an industry where it makes sense, or in a country where it's a legal requirement, you don't have to do it.
Exactly. And even if you do actual costing, you don't have to revalue inventory at actual costs.
Exactly. That's another really good point.
You can post to accrual accounts, importantly, and even and I think you were starting to talk about primary costs there maybe as well. And again, you don't have to use the primary cost component split if you don't want to, but in some companies it does make sense, I guess. Just to continue that complexity just a little, Janet, and we didn't discuss this, but I get the question sometimes, if I'm using actual costing, do I need to run variance analysis, period end processing? And that's in theory, you still need to use variance analysis, right? In theory.
Well, in theory, you could just settle and take the whole block of price differences, but you would lose the transparency, which says, I've got a variance of 50 because part was material price, part was quantity variance, part was scrap, and so on. Because all that happens in the actual costing is your lump production variance flows into actual costing rather than the individual categories.
Exactly. You don't get the analysis at the detail level in actual costing. Having said that, I believe there is an SAP note about running the latest version of actual costing together with variance analysis, with the variance split. And I will answer anybody who's got any questions on that. There is an SAP note, but in theory, you should still run both. And if anybody's got any comments on that, we're getting some chats here. Just 1 minute. I've got a note here, event-based revenue recognition is a huge improvement. Is that true, Janet?
It should be. No, I mean, as a basic idea, it's an excellent improvement. My challenge is, of course, just that results analysis was so flexible and had so many different switches that an awful lot of people, at a bullet point level, you can tick off and say, oh yeah, it does percentage of completion, it does completed contract, et cetera, and the posting logic's really nice. At a detailed level, of course, I end up talking to people who want more flexibility in the parameters. But as a basic idea, I think it's excellent.
Right. So SAP's heading in the right direction with that, by the sounds. We've got some good feedback. Thanks for that. So that's period and processing. Chapter 4. We should keep moving. We're up to chapter 4 in our journey through SAP product costing. So what's the next chapter? Anybody guess what the next chapter would be on? Chapter 5. That's not fair, so I'm going to go.
I guess I'm not allowed to answer, am I?
Absolutely, you can answer. What's your guess, Janet?
I thought it was scrap.
Read the books. It's scrap. Now, the reason that I created a chapter on scrap is because there's a lot to scrap. There's a lot of specific functionality for scrap variance. It's variance, but the really big thing with scrap variance is that you can separate out the scrap variance from other variances, which is a big deal for companies that have a lot of scrap. And it's really useful, and it's standard, just completely standard. Having said that, S/4HANA is still coming up to speed on scrap, so you will still be using scrap the way you're using it on ACC even with S/4HANA at the moment. And I guess Janet would have a better knowledge of that timetable. And but let's
certainly everybody, a lot of the people in matrix stock environments that I've been talking to want to have the scrap in universal parallel accounting. It's a resource question for us, how quickly we can develop it. It's not that we think that scrap's old-fashioned and you shouldn't have it anymore. You should have optimized yourself so that there isn't any. I mean, certainly I'm still talking to some companies who have big concerns about their scrap.
Of course. There's three main categories for scrap, and I list them here: assembly scrap, component scrap, operation scrap. Completely standard in SAP scrap fields and the material masters and some of the BOM item components for component scrap. Completely standard, and there's absolutely no reason not to use scrap in SAP because it's a huge advantage to be able to separate it out from the other variances. And some companies might have a lot of scrap, and it makes a lot of sense to understand what's going on. And you can also have an interaction between the different types of scrap. And in the book, I have a major section within scrap on explaining that interaction. There is some analysis to be done there, and recommend reading that. Okay, so we're up to chapter 5 of so can I just have a quick question just in the chat? Who uses scrap extensively and analyze it at the moment? In the chat, just say extensively or some. Just go ahead and put that in the chat for all to see. So we have a complete chapter on scrap, and that's a little unusual. That's something I thought it was so much in scrap. I thought it's good to have a separate chapter on scrap, and that was worthwhile, I believe. So that's chapter 5. Chapter 6 was the last chapter in the book. So and that would be reporting. So now we've done all the planning, the cost estimates, the actual processing, period end processing. Now we need to report on what's just happened. And all the reports still apply. We have, of course, we have some additional reporting with S/4HANA now. But obviously it's a big topic. And we mentioned something about reporting on variances now is now enhanced with the operation and the work center in the Universal Journal. We have access to that in variance analysis. Obviously, variances affect profitability reporting, which is now enhanced with margin analysis. And margin analysis accesses the Universal Journal directly. We look at the standard reports that we've always had, cost center reporting. We still have summarization reporting and product drill down reports. In addition, now we have the new SAP Fiori apps and the classic tools. And maybe Janet, you'd like to mention something about the product drill down reporting and the summarization reporting. We had some interesting discussions on this when writing the book.
That's right. I mean, I've always found people are a little bit confused about the difference between product drill down and summarization reporting, because in principle they're both aggregated forms of reporting. The difference is product drill down is built with the same tools that we use for COPA, so it's actually quite fixed in the dimensions that it can use. So it can use things like product group, order, plant, and that's about it. Whereas summarization reporting, you can take any field in the production order header and use that to build your report. So of course you can do the same things and say, I'm going to aggregate by plant, product group, product, or you can bring in completely different things. And one of the early things we did with HANA, we said, well, instead of building up these summarization levels with a summarization run, where we were actually writing additional data into the CO tables, this is the aggregation for the plant, this is the aggregation for the product group, this is the aggregation for the product. We tried to do it on the fly. And I think we included that in the book, didn't we? The on the fly analysis.
We did. we did, and obviously that's a big improvement because these reports, some of them used to take forever, but now they aggregate the data when you run the report on the fly, which is a huge improvement, obviously, for a lot of companies. So SAP's approved that summarization reporting, and with margin analysis, with the variance split, we now get detailed analysis of variances in margin analysis and profitability, and we get additional reporting and variance analysis in the SAP Fiori Apps.
Yeah, maybe the point we should add here was one of the things we had to change compared to your original book, where I think you had everything settling into costing-based COPA.
Yes.
With S/4HANA, the move is to margin analysis, which
Right.
is really just the next iteration of account-based COPA.
Right.
But of course, in the olden days, you would explain the difference between account-based and costing-based is that the costing-based had all the variance detail. And now we've got a configuration in there that says, just as you could in costing-based, you can now say, here are separate accounts for all the different variance categories that I'd like to see, or the combination of material plus whatever quantity variance.
Exactly. So let's keep moving on. We've now moved to Janet's chapter 7. So I wanted to give you 5 or 10 minutes on that chapter, Janet. So the future direction of variance analysis. And this isn't a large chapter. It's a chapter that gives us insight as to where SAP is heading with that. We've already started to discuss some of that. And I also give you the coupon, discount coupon for the book. And I'm trying to understand the logic of this code, but I think production variance analysis and 15 is in there somewhere. So please take a note of that for 15% off the book. And if you have any issues with that or any questions, just send me an email and we'll get it figured out. But that's our compliments for attending this webinar. So Janet, would you like to discuss?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about obviously, as John said, it wasn't quite a step-by-step description of what goes on, because I would have actually had to go back and rewrite a lot of chapter 3 and chapter 4 in terms of actually capturing the data and having it there. And you don't really need to redo that, because how do you do a goods issue? How do you do a confirmation? How do you do a goods receipt? That's exactly the same. The difference is what happens behind. So if you imagine as you do a material issue, if you've got your costing sheet set up and there's a 10% overhead, instead of waiting for period close to apply that 10% overhead, it'll immediately say, oh, you've got $100 of material cost, 10% overhead. So I'm going to send a $10 material overhead behind it. And then for the combination, the 100 plus 10, it's going to create your working process of 110 for that material plus material overhead. The same on the confirmation side, you post 5 hours of machine time, that's worth €50. You've got $50, you've got a 10% production overhead on top. It's going to apply you a $5 overhead on top, and then it's going to create you a $55 work in process posting. And it'll keep going on like that as you gradually add costs to the order. And then as you do a goods receipt, if you imagine you were making more than 1 unit, but you're making 10 units and you deliver the first 5 into stock, it would cancel half of your work in process. And it would keep going like that until you'd got the final delivery, at which point all your work in process should be backed out. And it's at that point that you'd start calculating your variances. So when we first started talking about event-based variance calculation, we were trying to calculate the variances, at least mentally, with every single movement. And then, of course, we realized that if I took 10 pieces out of stock, it wasn't at all clear where the 10 pieces were going to end up in the 10 pieces that I was trying to make, or you couldn't see the result yet. You could only see step 1, you'd taken 10 pieces out of stock. And it's only when you make that final delivery and you realize you're only able to deliver 9 that you've got a one piece variance. So that was why we moved the actual variance calculation relatively quickly to that final point when you've got the final delivery. And of course, if for any reason you don't get a final delivery, just like you did in the old solution, at technical completion, we would calculate variances and cancel any work in process. And from a user perspective, what changes is obviously you haven't got the period end closing transactions anymore. All this stuff should be happening automatically in the background. And it's only nerds like me that are sitting there following it through and making sure that the postings are right. But we've actually got a monitor log where you can stop and look what's happening on an individual order. Also, everybody who's been in controlling knows the one thing you must never do is stop a logistics process. It's the most stunningly unpopular thing you can do. So we would always let the materials issues go through. We would always let the confirmations go through, or the goods receipts. But if for some reason the config was wrong, we just have a huge error list that's building up saying, you know, we weren't able to post work in process because you're missing an account assignment, or we weren't able to update because we're missing this, that, and the other. And the idea is that somebody should be monitoring that log every couple of days to make sure that there's nothing untoward. And that's the same logic that we have in event-based revenue recognition, that it should be happening automatically, nothing should be going wrong. But we do have a monitor. And obviously at the beginning in testing, you use the monitor just to see if it's doing what you expect it to do. And gradually you're just using it for the error case. And at the moment, we've got quite a lot of limitations on this process. So I think I said in the scrap chapter, this new method doesn't treat scrap yet. So you can imagine I've got a few big customers who'd very much like to go to universal parallel accounting, but say, hey, if you don't do scrap, you know, scrap's such a big deal for us, we can't move with you yet. The other big thing we don't do at the moment yet is the mixed price variance. Now, you might think, oh, mixed costing, there's nothing to mixed costing. You just set up your procurement alternatives, mix them, and where's the problem? But one of the things that we do slightly differently in the new world is when we create the production order, we do what you did previously, namely we look at the material components, we look at the operations, and we look at the overhead, and we write that with respect to the order lot size, as we've always done. But what we also do is we look at the standard cost estimate and we adjust everything to reflect whatever the lot size in the order is compared to the costing lot size. And really that's the point where we struggle in a mixed cost estimate to bring that logic into play for that cost estimate that's on the production order. It's not an insolvable problem, but we just didn't get our logic clean by development close, so we just left that one. So as you can imagine, you know, lots of people use scrap who do variance analysis, and lots of people use mixed costing. I mean, I was talking to a customer today who wanted mixed costing in subcontracting and wanted some additions there. I know it's heavily used, but so it's going to be a question of watch this space. And that's probably the story of my book writing, is that I'm always trying to describe what's there, knowing what's coming, and also knowing what should be coming. It's a little bit of a challenge of moving sands.
Yeah, so it's all in the detail. But I also wanted to mention that Janet, you're nearly continuously writing blogs to update us on the latest situation, like in between our books. And Janet's blogs are very, very useful content. You just wrote one on universal parallel accounting, which was opened my eyes to it. It was very good. Thanks, Janet. And so I think with the future direction is watch this space is still being developed at the moment with SAP. So thanks for that, Janet. I really appreciate your time and the details that we just can't get from anywhere else. I just want to repeat the discount code for the book is on the screen, APVAS15, and the discount coupon for the Controlling conference in September is JJ100 for $100 off. And Janet may be a guest presenter at the conference, depending on how things work out. Janet's always welcome, but Janet's also busy. So
I'm also a very busy person. You've got the balancing act between, do I come and talk at your conference, or do I get one of those functions finished?
Janet has presented at the conference many times, especially early on when S4HANA was just being released. So that was a really, really interesting time, and still is. So let's see what other slides I've got here. Questions, that's the next step. We encourage questions. Now is the time to ask questions and get them answered from the experts. We've got 5 minutes.
We've got one from Piotr in the chat. Hang on, I've made my thing too big.
Okay. maybe Jessica, you can help us with this. I'm struggling to see the one in the chat.
So the first question that I have is the most recent. It is in order variance reporting. We're using target and planned and actual costs to understand if variance is coming from change of BOM and routing or as usage variance versus expected usage. But planned costs are based on planned order quantity and actual and target costs are based on delivered quantity. Is the recalculation of planned order costs considering delivered quantity available in the reporting now, or will it be soon?
Oh, that's a really good
Wow.
question. So I think that's based on my new logic that I just described, where I said we tried to write 2 lots of planned order costs into the planned order. But of course, at the time when we do the planning, we don't know the delivered quantity. We only know the order lot size. So in both cases, we look at the order lot size, but at the one, we look at the order lot size in combination with the material components and the activities and the overhead on the order. And the other, we look at the standard cost estimate, and then we flex it in line with the order quantity to give you the target cost. And I know, in fact, wasn't it at the conference that the guy from Eli Lilly, whose name is temporarily escaping me, even though I can picture him before me, he was saying that they use a function where they recalculate their order costs at the time of delivery.
I think that's Ross Christoph, maybe.
Yeah, it's Ross Christoph. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question, and there's a lot more to that question than meets the eye. But I don't think the planned quantities get changed. The target might, but I'm not completely sure I understand the question.
I mean, it sounds like it's the Ross Christoph question, because the final sentence is the recalculation of planned order costs considering delivered quantity available in the reporting now or will be soon. So the answer is it there now? No, it isn't. Could it be there in the future? Well, you're the second person after Ross Christoph who's raised that topic. So yeah, let's see how many more people raise it. But, maybe if there's other people sitting in and saying, yeah, we do that too, now's your time to tell me.
And I know at Eli Lilly, they have a lot going on behind the scenes too. I think they have a few customizations going on there. So it really is a Ross question for him to answer, maybe. Was there another question there, Jessica?
I answered one. I answered one from Piotr about the event-based variance calculation.
Nice. Okay.
But I hope that's covered, Piotr. If not,
yeah, let us
fire
know.
away.
Yeah, now's a good time.
We have some comments as well. I don't know, John and Janet, if you just want to comment on some of the comments we have in the chat.
I'm looking at them.
Oh yeah, I see I guess in ECC there was target cost version 1, version 2, etc. Yeah, I mean, obviously the new design with the event base, we kind of abandoned the whole notion of the target cost versions because we've got rid of the old COSB table and this, but the ideas remain. So effectively what we're doing when we do the goods delivery and compare it against what the costs would be. Oh, actually, now I see where you're coming with Piotr's thing. Yeah, it's the delivered quantity at that time. We use the delivered quantity, but we look at, we've got 2, they're called plan categories, and the one is like the target cost that compares the standard costs against the actual, and the other is like the one that compares the target costs against the costs on the order. I see that chapter. That final chapter should have been bigger, John. You should have bullied me more into writing more.
Always, when you're writing a book. But I've got a question for you, Janet, that I'm wondering, there's a lot more possible period in processes that we haven't mentioned, that I'm wondering, does event-based cover all the different options, or could you see a situation where you'd run some period in processing, even if you've got event-based processing?
I mean, for the event-based revenue recognition, we would always go back and revalue at period close, because we would still say the plan assumptions could have changed, because actually the event is the moment that the document hits the accounting interface. And then we look at the accounting interface and say, are you relevant? You know, what's the setting in the results analysis key and so on. But if somebody
So
goes in
that's
after the fact and says, you know, the plan isn't that we're going to spend 10,000, but that we're going to spend 12,000, that doesn't hit
Right.
the accounting interface. So we have to go in afterwards and say, actually, your percentage of completion has changed because your planning assumptions have changed. Now, we've
So it
not
is
got a mechanism like that in the working process and variance calculation. The other thing we've got in event-based revenue recognition is the ability to say, actually, I don't want all that noise. Please just
right.
calculate it once at period close.
So there
Because
is
obviously
some
there's a balancing
flexibility
act.
there.
Yeah, there is some flexibility.
Well, thanks so much, Janet, for joining us. I do really appreciate you spending your time with us. And I think that's it for our time, Jessica. Is that right?
Yes, and for those of you who had some last minute additional questions, I just want to reiterate that John and Janet will be answering these questions and we'll be posting it to our website and sending you guys a follow-up email with the answers to your questions. So don't fret if we did not get to them today. We will have them answered fully for you next week. John and Janet, thank you so much. Again, we always appreciate you having a great presentation for us, and we look forward to the future. Janet, hopefully your schedule frees up a little bit so you can get some TLC for yourself. And
Thank you.
everybody have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot then. Thanks for joining.
I just have to get this last question because I want to make sure I cover everyone. All right, we're good to go. Bye, guys.